we kind of sometimes get blinded or myopic, perhaps, about how we think about communications. We'll think about it just being for customers or just being for finding partners to work with from a B2B perspective. But the reality is that most executives, senior executives, are operating on multiple levels. They're communicating with their board members, they're communicating with their employees, they're communicating with outside stakeholders, third-party press, customers, and all of those audiences matter.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to be chatting with Bant Breen today, who founded Qnary quite a few years back. So I'd love to hear the origin story to start off with. Like, you know, you were in marketing and advertising for years, and then you just decided that there was a need. So what was the catalyst there?
It's a funny one. First of all, thanks so much for having me on this show, and I'm excited to be here. The thing about when I think about why I started Qnary, the origin elements have several dimensions. First dimension was that my last big role in advertising, I was part of IPG, Interpublic, and I was playing a role where I kind of was the entrepreneur in the company. I was starting a lot of new ventures for the business, a lot of services focused things, and we were acquiring things as well, but starting a lot of things. And I think there's almost kind of like when you're in a big company and you're doing that, at some point you kind of call BS on yourself a bit, because you're not really an entrepreneur. You think you're an entrepreneur, but you're not really taking the risk. I still had my big paycheck coming every month, and all the accoutrements of being part of a big corporate company. But I think that kind of feeling of I really need to kind of get my hands dirty and try to start a tech platform. And I'd had my eyes out to do something for years. And finally, the light bulb went off, eureka, there was an opportunity. And that was really in the space of helping executives, people, professionals, make the most of their online presence. Working in big companies in the digital marketing sphere, there are thousands of businesses that are focused on optimization and growing the social voice or creating content for brands, but there was nobody focused on individuals or executives. And so and I was looking at the results, and when we would do something with an executive, the engagement level would be anywhere between 10 to 20 times greater than it was for a brand without doing any marketing spend on top of it. And so it was kind of like a no-brainer. Like it was like one of those eureka moments where you're like, oh my God, why am I trying to get, Oreo cookies to spend more on an ad when I should just be getting their executives to be talking, because we'll cut through. And there was kind of that human insight, which is, I'd rather speak to you as a human, and you'd probably rather speak to me than to speak to a brand. The idea that I'd speak to this idea of a kind of an essence of whatever a brand is. It seems it really is quite artificial. People want to kind of connect with other human beings to understand and to move forward and to conduct business, more broadly speaking. And so that was the genesis of us building a technology platform that helps executives optimize what they're doing, generate thought leadership content, connect them with the audience and the network that they want to be most associated with. And voila, Qnary, here we are a decade later. We started the business in New York. We have offices all over the world. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list for the last 5 years in a row, one of the fastest growing companies in the world. So we're really excited about what we've been able to do. And And honestly, I still love it. I love it. I love it now for something different, to be honest, which is that when you get this thing going, you realize that there are so many people out there that have been denied a voice that really have so much to share and so much incredible knowledge about various topics. And I just love that. Love the fact that we're able to help bring out these voices. Whereas, in the past, it was always kind of like, in many cases, that CEO of the big Fortune 100 company that didn't really know what he was talking about, right? And now we're able to really hit people that are doing truly groundbreaking things, can add a level of depth and nuance to topics that I just think is spectacular. So it's adding kind of another layer to the business dialogue, the professional dialogue out there.
Yeah, that's a really cool origin story. Now, one thing I'd love to get your perspective on is like when you started the company, sure, social media was there, but social media has really transformed in the last 10 years. So how has the Qnary elevator pitch changed from what it was when you first launched to now when, it's not just LinkedIn. I mean,
Yeah.
An executive can have a big footprint, a social media footprint, a digital PR footprint, right? The blogosphere has changed since then.
Yeah.
How has that changed the elevator pitch for your sales team?
Yeah, it's changing and it's evolving again now, I would say. I'll get to that in a second, but originally we were heavily focused on search results. The idea being that the majority of individuals started looking up information, looking up other executives really on search, on Google. And we started the business at kind of a moment in time where Google's algorithm was going from being relatively basic, to be honest, and was being heavily manipulated by lots and lots of companies, to becoming much more sophisticated in how it ranked and tracked and thought about the information that it was putting in lists. And so we really focused heavily on search. And in fact, to be honest, I think today our logic still applies a lot of search ranking, SEO thinking. It's whether you care about your search rankings or not, it really is how the internet is tethered together, how digital information is tethered together. And so it's a helpful context to think about all areas of business. Now, so we started there. It shifted more into areas like LinkedIn as the number one place for people to look up other executives moved away from just being Google to now being LinkedIn. And now I would say it's shifted away from LinkedIn a bit. And it's now becoming much more multimedia focused. And so we're doing a lot more with YouTube channels that were, I would say, kind of ignored by us 5 years ago, like Instagram, are now incredibly important because the people that actually spend a lot of time there are now the leaders of businesses, and they have chosen to actually keep those things going, not just for personal reasons, but for professional reasons. So the big shift, I would say, is we've moved from a world where we were kind of really just trying to own your top 10 search listings to a world that you had to own that plus LinkedIn. And now we're moving into a world where it's very heavily focused on kind of a multimedia tapestry.
Yeah, that's fascinating because, generally when my team is doing SEO, because we started in SEO in '96 pre-Google, we're trying to own the entire search engine results page for a client's brand. Because you want to own the entire SERP, not just get the top ranking, and it's easy to get top ranking for yourself, right? With your brand, but people are not just going to look at the first listing when they're doing reputation research, either at an individual level or a brand level. And so I love the fact that you got that holistic view. And the reality is all those other content areas that you're talking about, those tend to rank well. Right. Yeah. So, the individual's LinkedIn profile, perhaps their Twitter profile, perhaps their YouTube channel, those are going to rank well. And
Yeah,
so
and don't get me wrong. I mean, it still matters. The search is still incredibly important. And as I said, it's kind of part of how we optimize for other channels as well. I would just say that probably the focus has shifted a little bit into some of these other areas as they've been perhaps ranked more highly by Google. It's kind of, it shows you how intertwined we are
it
on
is
all
very
this stuff.
intertwined.
Yeah. But I guess the running joke for the last, 10 years has always been the best place to bury a dead body is on the second page of your Google search results.
Yeah,
You really got to own that first page. That's the key.
absolutely. So I certainly think about it, it being super valuable in the B2B context, right? Because when
Mhm.
people are making B2B purchasing decisions, right, they don't really think about making that decision purely about I'm buying from the brand or I'm buying at the company, but they want to know, the person that they're buying from as well. Do you find that it's been more interesting for B2B and in the investor relations side of things? Or a lot of the
Yeah,
B2C
I mean,
companies
yeah.
also jumping on board?
Well, it's a great question. I would say that our customers are B2B, B2C, really everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, the B2C businesses do use it probably more for stakeholder management,
Mm.
and things like their investors, their partners. They're trying to kind of perhaps own a corporate part of the communication story. So I'll have conversations with large, maybe beverage companies, and they'll talk about how they want to be perceived as more sustainable, or they want that to kind of be bled through not only from a customer perspective, but as how people think about working with them as a business. And so it's what I guess I talk about a lot is we kind of sometimes get blinded or myopic perhaps about how we think about communications. We'll think about it just for being for customers or just being for finding partners to work with from a B2B perspective. But the reality is that most executives, senior executives, are operating on multiple levels. They're communicating with their board members, they're communicating with their employees, they're communicating with outside stakeholders, third-party press, customers, and all of those audiences matter.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I sort of, to some extent, see part of the value that I think you're trying to combine together, similar to what PR agencies do with media training, right? Because they try to train the
Yeah.
executives to think about, what you're saying and where it ends up, right? So,
Yeah.
and I've certainly seen in those cases that executives that don't have media training sometimes forget that even the Facebook post to their friends is quasi-public, right? And of course, tweets and LinkedIn are highly visible. So what mistakes do you see folks making before they get to you and before they get the level of hand-holding and structure that you guys provide?
I mean, it's funny. I'll start because you just triggered it in my mind. Is that we definitely see companies sometimes start by hiring a PR firm. And I would say that's probably not necessarily the greatest place to start, primarily from a cost perspective,
Yeah,
and the results
absolutely.
they'll get. I mean, most companies will kind of they'll put their business plan together. Let's say they're kind of like a Series B, Series C company, and they now actually have a budget, and they're told, okay, well, we should do more PR, and they hire these agencies 20 grand a month, and these companies really they can't really do that much. They end up doing a lot of time on figuring out maybe a positioning, which is great. That strategic positioning work is valuable. And then they'll do these meet and greets, but the journalists are so overwhelmed right now. They don't really have time for anybody who doesn't have a voice already. They're
Yeah.
really looking for that kind of, so I would say it's important to kind of start out building that presence before you get to that stage of hiring, a big PR firm. That's a mistake we see sometimes, and we end up kind of taking a step back to take two steps forward. So it's that can be challenging. the other thing I think just is that myopia that we've seen, where executives somehow bifurcate their brains, where they think that there's their professional life and then there's whatever they want to be doing. And the reality is that today everything is so holistic and integrated and merged that you have to kind of take that more total view on things. And I mean that not that they need to be worried about posting something personal, but that they just need to be thinking about their whole self. And that's really what I would say we can learn from the younger generations. Actually, they're much more about their whole selves than we ever were. And I think it's just such a blessing to get that message from them, where they expect their leaders to be living complete lives, that that the idea that they would be living for work is just preposterous to them.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because, if you want to make an impact on certain segments of the population, whether it's, age based or demographic based, you need to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
If you silo your life to the point where it's much harder to be authentic. If you like, I only ever talk about business and I never talk about like who I am and what my passions are, et cetera.
Yeah.
People are less interested in that. I think makes you a less interesting person if you're two siloed people as opposed to one holistic person.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
so that's a great point. I think a lot of folks can learn a lot from that. One of the things, in those few cases where we've sort of branched out our services to include, taking a subject matter expert internally within the company, which could be a founder or a non-founder, right? Is, some of them are naturals, they're charismatic, and others are not quite so charismatic out of the gate, right? So how do you recommend people deal with sort of the reputation management, content creation process if they're not sort of a natural on camera presence, let's say?
Yeah, I hear you. And we certainly work with individuals. We've set up guidelines on how someone can be more clear when they speak on video or via audio. However, I will tell you that one of the things that we've learned is that any advice that people give that you're told to be slicker in a way, or to be cool, it's really crap advice. The viewers audience is much more clever than that, and they really want to hear people that actually are saying something. There's just so much noise. If you want to go see a beautiful person, go to Instagram and look up any male or female model, and they'll be talking about nothing and being attractive. That's
Right.
fine. But if you want to hear people that actually have a point of view on topics, it doesn't really matter that you're well spoken, or that it just matters that you tell a story clearly. It's okay that you're a little bit nervous. Just do it. And I guess for me, the biggest learning is that, and that's hard for some people, is that we come from a world where we were all, people that are a little bit older were trained to kind of don't put anything out there that's not flawless. Like, be perfect. And it's just the worst advice in a digital age. The best advice is to be iterative, to move forward quickly, to kind of challenge yourself to do new things, that you're going to stumble. Be okay with that. Stumbling is awesome. Just go. And so when I meet people that are not comfortable, I say, look, do this. Let's do this every day. Let's keep going. And within a year, some of our customers are amazing. So it really just, it's doing it, making a commitment to it, and then not being uncomfortable with the fact that maybe it's okay to not be the goal shouldn't be to be slick, right? The goal should never be to be slick,
Then you break the authenticity side of it, right?
Yeah.
So,
I sometimes will talk to professional sales coaches, and sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, you don't want to do this, or you don't want to do that, and you're kind of like, oh, but if you ever presented that to me, I would never buy your product. So there's this kind of, like lean into being whoever you are and be comfortable with that. So
Absolutely. It's sort of funny because, the services that you provide obviously are cross industry, cross category, and some of them have sort of fast news cycles, and some of them have no news cycle at all, really. I mean, it's like
yeah.
you just never read about the industry at all. Does that change your advice to your clients? Like, because sometimes there's not as much to talk about in certain industries as other industries, and in other
Yeah, I
industries,
suppose,
it's
but what we tend to do is tell people to focus on a short list of topics where they can cut through. And you can usually find a way to nuance those stories and to tell them the same theme in different ways
right.
over time. We work now, I think last check was like 178 different business verticals or something
Mhm.
like that. Some of the challenges that we have is that certain industries are highly regulated, so
Sure.
we just have to be, we're really looking for news that moves the story forward or adds another data point that supports a thesis that somebody might have. We're always able to kind of push that type of thing forward, but we haven't had a problem where it's not that we're working with a category where there's no news. And because ultimately I would say that if there's no news, that's news. Like that's like that's news, right?
Yeah,
If no
it's
one's talking
interesting.
about your industry, you got something you should talk about.
Right, right. Yeah, I know when we hit the sort of equivalent of sort of the writer's block moment, right? When you're trying to ideate on content, we always try to say, well, let's try to think out how to co-create content with your partners, whether it's your suppliers or your customers to do testimonials or whatever. Like often that just creates an entirely new layer of stuff that you can do because now you're not doing it by yourself, and it's just much easier to storytell when you're collaborating.
Yeah,
Have you been
absolutely.
doing that as well with clients?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we have been trying to do more of that kind of cross pollination, and it's worked on a category basis at times. Last year we did a big kind of push around Earth Day because
Hmm.
we had a lot of companies in the sustainability space, and we were able to cross pollinate and bring together lots of groups for kind of a shared webcast podcast experience that really worked well. There are going to be moments where we can do that. I would say now we're finding that it's starting to because the world is opening up again. We're actually going out of our homes and seeing each other again and going to conferences again. There's been an exciting moment where we've been able to help organizations kind of curate a group of people together, and so that's, I think, where we're going to be able to do more of that.
Yeah, one other thing I sort of struggle with personally is sort of in my many hats that I wear and my personal reputation management, I guess you call it, is obviously I can be very proactive in creation of content, whether I'm doing it individually or co-creating like we are now, or I can react to things in the social feeds, right? So there's
Mhm.
things that other people are posting, either that are newsworthy or relating to an industry. And obviously, you can't spend all day just doing that because I could just sort of watch my LinkedIn feeds and other social feeds and be very reactive to things that are going on in the industry. So when it comes to sort of balancing that, what advice do you give to your clients as far as the creation and promotion of new content versus the sort of jumping on board with the business equivalent of a meme, right? Like something that's hot in a category.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, probably one of the reasons why we exist as a business is because at the end of the day, the only asset that we can't get more of as a human is time.
Right.
And so anything that anyone can have that can help them achieve these goals that they when we started the business, people didn't know that they really needed to be doing anything
Mhm.
online, to be perfectly blunt. But now they do. And now it's just a frustration thing, which is they have meetings to go to, they have targets that they have to hit, they have planes to catch, kids to pick up at school, right? There's
Mhm.
lots of things people got going on in their lives, and they just need support from a time perspective to do it. Um, in terms of how much time people should be spending on this type of stuff, I would say that one of the things that has changed for me over time is I consume media in a dramatically different way now. I consume media really through my networks of influence. I look at what you're posting, Kevin. I look at what other people are posting, and that really frames the way I consume information. And so perhaps some of the time that I would have spent in the past reading the newspaper or something like that has been given over to these networks that you create. And so it hasn't really been an additional time suck for me as much as a time shift to a slightly different way of consuming information.
Yeah, and that has an impact on obviously what you would recommend to others. Do most of your clients end up coming to you because of some reputation management crisis where they're sort of like, oh my God, this happened, and they're trying to put a Band-Aid on it? Or is it much more strategic that they're like, okay, it's time for me to focus on building my personal reputation?
When we started, there was a pre-existing industry that was out there, which was kind of reputation management. And these were companies that worked with executives to help them out of a reputation crisis.
Yeah.
We certainly have those customers, but I would say that the vast majority of our customers are more forward thinking, or sometimes what I say is if that industry was defensive, we're more offensive, which is to say that we would work with customers to tell their story, which is that your online. I started the business and I said something that seems so obvious now, but people didn't really grok this, which was that their online presence, their personal presence online mattered. It mattered in terms of their reputation. It mattered in terms of the reputation of their business. It mattered in terms of the opportunities that they received, as well as the opportunities that their business received. And so it's that offensive thinking outside, thinking forward, thinking growth that we, I think, are more supportive of. We do have that defensive element. We do it. It's just, I would say that if you're offensive, if you're thinking about having an online presence, growing your online presence, when you do have a crisis, you'll be in a much better position. I sometimes say that it's like a for better or for worse moment, right? For better, you want to control your search results because you can make the most of your business. For worse, something bad happens, you want to have control of your story so you can solve it, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I've noticed, because we're more typically doing digital content and SEO and content co-creation for brands as opposed to individuals, but we notice that there's like the 6 to 9 month tipping point if you're aggressively creating new content. That like the ROI is delayed, and then all of a sudden you reach this tipping point. We're like, oh my God, all this stuff that we put in the can and got out there is really starting to rank, and it's really starting to work, and we're getting this momentum. Do you find that that's the same case when you're doing personal?
It's not the same, and it's because the criteria for that Google and others place on brand and corporate information is pretty strict, and it's getting more and more strict every day. So they don't want to rank your page until you've ticked every box, and they change as they change the rules on how they rank stuff all the time. So if you've done something wrong, you could be penalized and you don't even know why or how. I would say what we found when we've talked to the developers of places at Google and LinkedIn and Twitter and others is that they actually kind of philosophically are in line with what we're talking about, which is that people want to be connected with people, right? Developers kind of hate the fact that people that don't really know what they're talking about are talking about, AI. the greatest way to piss off a developer is to talk about technology when you've never coded anything, so right. So they really want to hear from the people inside of businesses that really know things. And so they've designed their own technologies to support that kind of almost peer-to-peer to almost, people-to-people thinking, right?
Yeah. That's a great point. So what has you excited for this year? I mean, do you guys have stuff in the pipeline, or just generally in the industry you have some things you're excited about? I mean, AI obviously has been in the news a lot, and will be interesting to see how that shapes the future. But
yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I find that the ChatGPT thing has been wonderful, but it's also one of those things where it's fascinating to me that is the thing that caught the cultural zeitgeist, that is the way this came through. Qnary has been working with OpenAI for years. So, I have a PhD in machine learning. We do a lot of work in that space. So, and so a lot of the things that people are excited about are not really new. I mean, it's interesting to me that this is somehow suddenly woken up, and I sometimes, my cynical side is that the powers that be have decided that, oh, we need to find growth. This is where let's really kind of talk a lot about this right now. What will be interesting to see is how Microsoft really embeds this into their suite of products. Mm-hmm. That I think is going to be the key thing, and how we see this really making other industries smarter. I saw some really interesting stuff the other day in the legal profession. I would love to see that kind of restructured, maybe disintermediated a bit, to see how you could apply this technology in those spaces. But yeah, AI is interesting. I would say our big push this year is to even go deeper on the multimedia side. Mm-hmm. We've added in a ton of new video features in our technology, and there's a lot more coming down the pike this year. So you'll see those elements. Then the other thing that's been kind of interesting for us, probably more interesting just for me, because we're just the geeks on the inside of the company, is how we're going deeper into organizations. So we've always been kind of the top 5% of executives, but now with a lot of these large organizations, we're going deeper and deeper into them, and how we're able to kind of weave that story together from kind of the employee level all the way up to the CEO has been really, really cool.
Yeah, that sounds really fun, because whenever we needed additional ideas of content for clients, we would always go in deep into the customer service teams, deep into the sales teams, deep into the HR teams, because they had a completely different lens that they viewed everything through, right? So it was great from the perspective of content, but I never thought about then attaching the names of the individuals and letting them build their little personal reputations around that as well, and making it more authentic from that perspective. Not that they wouldn't necessarily be on a video or be on a podcast with, when we were working with them, but sometimes they would, because they were the subject matter experts, right? And so they could speak intelligently on things. But that's very cool that your business is layering into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for joining me, Bant. It was great to catch up and to hear what you're working on. And
always good to talk, buddy.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.